When people asked about the upcoming season of Phineas and Ferb, Dan and Swampy told us that the show is basically gonna stay the same and that they got a lot of the same staff working on it. And I'll have to assume they said this just to reassure longtime fans that the show won't be doing a complete 180 turn and change its premise, characters, animation, and humor entirely. They must be aware that reboots and revivals often just fail, so they probably wanted the audience to at least give this new season a chance. And I must say, it seems to have worked. The news of the show's revival was pretty well received for the most part. Still, we can't really expect this new season to be exactly like seasons 1 through 4. If the show wants to succeed and keep the audience interested, especially now that almost a decade has passed since season 4, then some things just need to change. So in today's video, I'd like to go through all the minor, major, and major monogram related changes to the show that we can expect. If you can think of some more, of course, let me know in the comments. First things first, one thing that will surely change is the setting. We already know that this new season will take place a whole year after the show's original run, so we're gonna learn about the next summer. And this is already a huge step forward for a show that spent almost a decade telling us every excruciating detail of everything that happened in those 3 months, and literally nothing more. So this means that, Halloween and Christmas specials aside, the characters will actually age, and there's gonna be a 9-month time jump we basically don't know anything about. And that has never happened before. They always showed it all to us. Nothing ever happened off screen or between episodes, so this is a first. Candace and Jeremy's relationship will solidify, Isabella will grow much more tired of chasing Phineas, Baljeet might start skipping some grades given how he'll graduate from college way before Phineas and Ferb even finish high school, then Vanessa and Stacy will be hiding their respective secrets for over a year now, and so on. But one thing we know for sure happened during these 9 months, and I'm not talking about a pregnancy, is Doof actually turning evil again. So the show will bring us up to speed on everything that's happened to him since the end of the original summer, and who can tell what else changed in the meantime. Maybe someone did get pregnant and like Isabella, Buford, or Baljeet are gonna have a little brother or sister. That'd be so cool. It seems you guys think that Isabella would be a pretty great big sister. Although the formula will remain the same, with the boys building their things, Candace trying to bust them, and Doof trying to take over the tri-state area, I do expect the season to rely on its supporting cast way more than ever before. After all, the last Phineas and Ferb season we got left us with many questions unanswered and many stories untold, and most of these mainly involved secondary characters like Vanessa, Stacy, Monogram, Monty, and even Carl. You might have noticed that, as the show evolved, its secondary characters slowly became more and more prominent. Just compare the average season 1 and season 4 episodes. You'll notice that they went from barely having any screen time at all to always showing up day in and day out. People like Vanessa and Carl initially barely had personalities of their own. In fact, Vanessa originally even had to borrow some of Candace's personality traits, so they had her try to bust her dad for his evil schemes and all. That didn't last long, luckily. Yet she, along with many more characters, eventually grew, and these guys became fan favorites to the point of having entire episodes dedicated to them. So I do have a feeling that, while the writers will try to keep the formula fresh for Candace, Doof, and the boys, they will also spice things up by having the supporting cast way more involved and actually having arcs of their own. So I imagine we're gonna see a whole lot more from, for instance, Stacy, but not only when it comes to Barry and his secret life, but just in general. She's probably gonna show up more often alongside Candace, just to remind the audience that she does exist and that she's important to the story. The same goes for everyone else, of course, and even Major Monogram himself. Weirdly enough, the guy only had a major role in a handful of episodes, and there's barely any stories that actively involve him from start to finish, so who knows, this could actually be a Major Monogram renaissance. Because of all these secondary story arcs developing and evolving, I also expect the show to build towards an actual season finale and be a little more story-driven, ever so slightly. Both in Milo Murphy's Law and Hamster and Gretel, 2 shows Dan and Swampy have been working on since the end of Phineas and Ferb, the writers decided to tie some of their episodes together to tell a story that spans an entire season and ultimately ends in a significant season finale. Now, mixing the episodic format with some serialized story elements is something Phineas and Ferb Ferb never really did. Its episodes either tell self-contained, standalone stories, or occasionally work in pairs. Think of Unfair Science Fair, Bubble Boys, or even the Meep episodes, they have their own thing too. However, that's pretty much it. So this is a pretty big change that we can expect. Phineas and Ferb doesn't really have actual season finales for seasons 1 through 3, and even though the very last episode of the original run is an actual factual season finale, it doesn't rely much on the previous episodes. It just works on its own, so anyone who's watched at least 5 episodes would be able to enjoy it pretty much to the fullest. With season 5 though, this is likely gonna change. The show won't drop its episodic format, clearly, but it will almost certainly find a way to subtly connect its episodes and build towards a big season finale. Again, I mostly say this because of how they handled My Little Murphy's Law and Hamster and Gretel. They did experiment a lot with those shows, so hopefully they've also learned from them. As we discussed in my last season 5 video, there's actually plenty of ways Candace can be used this season, so go check out this video if you wanna hear my theories, but we know for sure that her busting obsession will still be a thing, albeit to a lesser degree. If you wanna know why, just check out this other video of mine. But one big busting related change that really needs to be addressed in my opinion concerns, you know, the advancements in technology that occurred since the original run of the show up to this day. Just bear with me for a second. Because Phineas and Ferb started airing in 2008, not only social media wasn't a thing yet, but also phones couldn't quite do what they can do today. So this made Candace's life way harder because she had to go through a whole lot of trouble to get her mom to see whatever her brothers were doing. So the premise actually worked pretty well there. Candace's flip phones have always been pretty crappy in general. They could barely do anything with their very limited storage and unrealistic fragility, so it made sense for her to rarely use her phones in her busting attempts. Initially, they had her phones get destroyed, had pop-ups appear on top of her photos, or simply had Candace put her finger in front of the lens. They kept coming up with several excuses and reasons why Candace's phones would be unusable, and at the end of the day, that was all pretty easy to believe given how crappy her flip phones were. In season 3's episode Candace Disconnected, Linda even bought her daughter a phone that could only make phone calls and literally nothing else. It just could not take pictures because of how cheap it was. So you see, there was always an in-world explanation as to why Candace couldn't take pictures. It was often easier for her to just take Linda to the place or take the invention to her. It was 2008, 2010, 2012, so all these excuses seemed pretty legit, given what Candace had to work with. But when season 4 came out, it just seemed too unrealistic for a teenage girl in 2013 to not have a somewhat decent phone that could at least take and also send pictures. So at that point, they just had to give Candace a smartphone at long last. I think Great Balls of Water is the first episode that actually shows Candace using a smartphone. Still, when that happened, the writers just stopped trying to find ways around it, and they just ignored this matter at once. They acted like her phone simply couldn't take pictures, or like Candace simply forgot her phone actually had a camera. They never gave us a proper excuse as to why she wouldn't just take those damn pictures and send them to her mom. So even though originally cell phones couldn't do squat and the show's premise worked just fine, because we've been blessed with technology, now it's easier than ever for Candace to simply take a pic and send it to her mom. It's a matter of seconds. Picture, boom, busted, now she can move on with her life and do something more productive. We can't just ignore this fact. We're in 2024 now. Although only 1 year has passed in universe, almost a decade has passed in real life. And because the show always keeps up with the times, similarly to The Simpsons and Family Guy with their floating timelines, to keep the show modern and make it fit with My Little Murphy's Law and Hamster and Gretel's universe, technology just has to evolve alongside it. So what now? How can they fix this? What solution did I come up with? Well, this would be both extremely dumb and insanely brilliant at the same time in my opinion, but it would be so interesting if Candace actually tried to send her mom pictures of what her brothers are doing, yet Linda would always dismiss it all thinking those pictures are fakes, thinking they are just AI generated images Candace created to back up her stories. Candace, this is clearly an AI-generated image. How do you expect me to believe you? Please, don't make me waste my time, I got frozens. Not only would this be super in character for Linda, but it would also be a super effective excuse as to why Candace doesn't take pictures. Dan Povenmire himself actually joked about how, if Candace actually did take pictures of Phineas and Ferb's doings, then the show would end right there and there wouldn't be much of a story. Of course, he was just kidding there, but this cell phone matter really needs to be addressed in some way, shape or form on the show. I personally never cared or paid too much attention to this detail growing up. I may be 23, but on the inside I'm like 80 and still think flip phones are peak technology. I can't tell you how much of a badass my grandma was when she would nonchalantly open her flip phone to answer calls. She was amazing, but for kids these days, this would absolutely count as a plot hole. Something needs to be said there, so Dan, Zwampy, feel free to use my idea for season 6. I'll send you my resume. Finally, the writer's room 2 seems to be pretty much the same, with the notable absence though of Aliki Theophilopoulos, one of the few writers on the show I actually know about. She's a writer, storyboard artist, and songwriter who was responsible for a lot of the Finabella magic, and I really fear her absence will be noticed. I mean, she's the one who suggested a kiss between Phineas and Isabella at the end of Night of the Living Pharmacists. I feel like she was the main Finabella fan in the writer's room. Interestingly though, it appears, even though it's not confirmed yet, that Olivia Olsen, aka Vanessa's voice actress, is joining the writer's room. Or at the very least, she hung out with the writers an awful lot lately, according to Dan's TikToks. She's a songwriter, so maybe that's what she did in the writer's room, but it's just weird that she was always there the entire time. Whether she'll be a writer or not though, I feel like Vanessa's gonna have a whole lot to do this season, so stick around for that. Although her father, Martin Olsen, is also a writer on the show, so maybe she's following her dad's footsteps? Sadly, one final thing that will be different this season is Ferb's voice. After the show ended in 2015, Ferb's voice actor changed from Thomas Sangster to David Enrico Jr. Of course, if you watched the Phineas and Ferb Effect or the Candace movie, then you already know about this new voice, and you're probably totally fine with it, but I'm sure that those who stopped watching the show over a decade ago and just love complaining about everything, they will surely mention this change to complain about how the revival is not being faithful to the original or whatever. I actually plan on enjoying this new season, so if you don't want to, it's perfectly fine, just go sit in the corner and shut up. At this point, let me know your thoughts on the matter and what else you guys think will be different in season 5. I will be reading all your comments. I'm actually very curious because you guys often have super cool ideas. But with that being said, I thank you all so much for watching and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao!